Hey Macy,
Hey Bijan.
you want to finally start that podcast combining mental health and comedy?
I don't know, man. There's so many podcasts out there. How will we even separate ourselves?
Yeah, we probably won't.
Yeah.
Let's just record it anyway. You're a stand-up comedian living in LA who's been in therapy since you were in kindergarten.
Yeah, right. That's true. Thank you for sharing. And you're a psychiatry resident doctor at Harvard Hospital.
That some people would say that, and who wouldn't listen to that? Most people, right?
I don't know. Maybe some.
Yeah, maybe just a... You know what? Let's just start it. I'll bring the mental health professionals.
Yeah, I guess I'll bring the comedians, but there's no guarantee that they'll show up.
Welcome to SSRI'M OK with Bijan and...
Macy.
The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always seek the advice of a qualified mental health or medical provider with any questions you may have regarding a psychiatric or medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by the guests and hosts are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of their affiliated hospitals or medical facilities. While we make every effort to broadcast correct information, we are still learning. We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine and psychiatry are constantly changing. We welcome any comments, suggestions, or corrections of errors. Lastly, any humor or satire used in this podcast is not intended to trivialize or minimize the seriousness of mental health issues. Listener discretion is advised. Hey everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our very first podcast episode on SSRI'M OK, and today we're talking about SSRIs.
Yes, and also you're Bijan and I'm Macy.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Just in case people are confused. Yeah, we wanted to just cover this first because we wanted to go ahead and cover why we called it SSRI'M OK and what SSRIs even are, because a lot of people, not everyone understands the title, so we thought this was a good place to start.
Yeah, we got a mix of reactions to our title.
People that like it love it.
Mm-hmm.
People that don't get it are polite.
Very polite. Extremely polite. Oh my gosh. I really like those people.
Me too.
I really appreciated it. But you could tell. You could tell they didn't understand.
Because someone thought it had to do with a boat.
Yeah, it was like a naval ship. The SSR. I'm okay. That sounds like a great ship.
It's a great ship. I would like to name just like my little rowboat that one day. You think you can name rowboats?
I would love that. If you ever live on like a sailboat or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
The SSRI'M OK. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I guess we'll jump into SSRIs in a bit, but maybe we should also talk about how we know each other.
Sure. I think that's a good idea. We've known each other now for like 9 years. Not crazy.
Is that real?
9 years ago, you and I met in a stand-up comedy class.
Oh my gosh.
And at that time, we had both graduated. Okay, we'll scratch that. I actually technically didn't graduate, but I was there 4 years, so I really feel like I did my time. But you graduated, and I did my time, and we met, and then you went a different route, but it both brought us here on this podcast today. I just did I'm still doing stand-up, just still in Los Angeles, and where are you? I mean, I know, but do they know?
No, I don't know if they know. I'm in Boston now. I was in Chicago for med school. I was doing that for a bit, and then I transitioned to residency. So I'm doing my residency training in psychiatry right now. I still did stand-up in Chicago and maybe a little bit in Boston too. And then I also did some improv training in Second City in Chicago. But now I'm here, and now I'm trying to mix both of them. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something I've been wanting to do with you, especially for a long time. So I'm very happy that we're actually getting this started.
Yeah, this is exciting. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows where this will take us?
Right.
SSRI, I don't know.
SSRI, I have no idea.
Is this going to be a recurring bit?
I have a feeling it will be.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling we'll probably do it too much and it won't be funny anymore.
I agree.
But
I agree.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us what these SSRIs even are?
I would love to, and I also think it would be nice to do in the way that people get taught in medicine too.
Oh.
Like if you ever watch a doctor with a bunch of medical students, they quiz them and ask them questions to answers that they don't even know.
Okay.
And so
That
let's
seem
do it
like
that
a
way.
great way to learn, but let's do it.
You know what? Very toxic, actually, but that's for another episode.
Okay.
I found it helpful sometimes, but anyway, so we'll talk about SSRIs.
Okay.
Let's start with this. Let's start with your brain. What are the cells in your brain called?
They are called cells. Thank you.
We
Okay.
should put in an applause there.
Yes. Okay. So the cells are called I want to say protons again. They're the cells are, well, there's a bunch of different ones. The cells are,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a bunch
That was a
of
good
them.
answer.
Okay.
There's a bunch of them.
So
What
you go
are
ahead.
some of the main ones called?
Serotonin.
Oh, those are neurotransmitters. So
Yeah. No, I know.
All right.
Okay. The protons are called the nucleus is in there.
the nucleus
Is in the atom.
Oh, you're close. I see what. Oh, I was wondering where you were going at. So yeah, the cells. Some of the cells in your brain are called neurons.
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 Damn it.
I see where you see
God.
the nucleus. Thing.
Yeah, I got almost there.
Almost there. So you have neurons in your brain. And how do neurons communicate with each other?
With a wave.
With a wave?
Yeah.
Like an electrical wave?
Yes.
Or like this thing, like in a crowd wave?
Well, if you zoom in, it looks like a crowd wave, but it's electrical.
Yes, it's electrical, and the electrical impulse leads to the release of neurotransmitters.
Right. Like
Like, what are some neurotransmitters, Macy? Tell them.
serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, I call them norepinephrines, but they're what, norepinephrines?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. And then the third one's the hard one. Is it nagging women?
Where did that one come from?
I don't know. I'm sorry. What's the third one?
It starts with a D.
Oh, dopamine. Yes.
Dopamine, you got it. And just for FYI, those are also called monoamines, just those types of neurotransmitters, but we'll get to that later. All right, so you have these neurons talking to each other, and you have neuron 1 and neuron 2. Neuron 1 will dump off neurotransmitters onto neuron 2.
Okay.
And that's how they communicate. So they'll drop off serotonin, they'll drop off dopamine, they'll drop norepinephrine, and a bunch of other neurotransmitters. And what you should also know is that neurons like to recycle. So once they're done dropping those neurotransmitters off, neuron 1 will pick them back up and use them later.
So nothing goes to waste.
Nothing goes to waste.
Okay.
Reuse, reduce, recycle. That's the body's motto.
Okay.
And they take them back through these channels called reuptake channels or reuptake transporters. So that's kind of how, at a very simplified version, how your brain cells communicate with one another.
Question, Professor. Where do the synapses come in?
Oh, great question.
Thank
So
you.
that space where neuron 1 and neuron 2, where neuron 1 drops off the neurotransmitters to neuron 2, that little space is called the synapse.
So have you heard people say my synapses aren't firing, or they are firing, or do people say?
I have heard that before. Yeah.
I wonder what. I think it kind of just means you're off. You're not firing on all cylinders. I feel like people combine firing on all cylinders with synapses.
Yeah, I feel like a more anatomically correct statement would be my neurons aren't firing.
You think neurons aren't firing?
Because the synapse is just the space in between the two.
So, yeah, my neurons aren't firing. I'm not reuptaken today.
No.
Was that a good saying?
I like that. I don't think other people will, to be honest, but I like
probably
it.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah. Because then you'd have to explain this whole thing again, and
That's
no
true.
one wants to hear this.
No. But that's a good way we're starting out our podcast, though,
I agree.
with things
What
that
better
people
way?
don't want to hear. Okay, but that's a pretty good general. I feel like, that's very, I feel like I could maybe get that right on a test now. I don't know that and I can kind of visualize. I don't know that I believe it, but I'm going to trust you, that that's what's happening in my brain.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate the trust. And let's start with that.
Okay.
So, I guess now we can just move on to SSRIs.
Yeah.
So SSRI stands for, do you remember? Yeah.
Serotonin. Nope. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
You got it.
Great.
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So what that means is that these drugs, they selectively bind to the reuptake channels for serotonin. So remember, neuron 1 likes to reuptake serotonin. That drug blocks it off, so now serotonin remains in the synapse and binds to neuron 2 and neuron 2's receptors for serotonin.
Okay. That's something that everyone does naturally, but SSRIs make you recycle more.
Exactly. Or recycle less even. So
Oh.
it stops your ability to reuptake. So now you just have a bunch of serotonin staying in your synapse.
Mm-hmm. Just floating.
Just floating
Okay.
and binding to neuron 2's receptors for serotonin.
Okay.
So it's inhibiting the reuptake channel.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the history of Prozac.
That's
and I think this
right.
was a request that you had.
Yes, I wanted to know.
So essentially a lot of SSRIs were discovered because of treatments in tuberculosis.
Whoa.
So essentially, in the early 1950s, researchers were trying to discover medications to help treat tuberculosis. And they came across this drug called isoniazid, which we still use today.
Mm-hmm.
And when they started implementing it, it led to a 90 to 95% cure rate among tuberculosis patients. So they were researching this drug, and they had some kind of offshoots of it. So there was isoniazid. They came up with this new drug called iproniazid. And what they noticed about iproniazid was that people who were on it they noticed the patients on it had these quote unquote mood elevating effects.
They started dressing nicer, going to work. Yeah.
So so they said they noted
Easier to be around with their family.
They were more social, they were sleeping more, they had more appetite.
Whoa.
And that's in the literature, that was where the term antidepressant was first coined, because they were describing the effects that this medication had on people who they were just treating for tuberculosis.
Wow.
So they researched it a little more, and they found that this medication inhibited an enzyme that's in everyone's brain. It's called monoamine oxidase.
You brought those up, right?
I did bring monoamines. So monoamines, those neurotransmitters we talked about, are examples of monoamines.
Okay.
So this enzyme that we all have, monoamine oxidase, that medication blocked it. So, and monoamine oxidase normally breaks down those neurotransmitters. So you now have this medication blocking the breakdown of those neurotransmitters.
Okay.
So long story short, that medication led to increased levels of serotonin, norepinephrines, you say,
My
or
norepinephrines.
norepinephrine, and dopamine. So that's what that tuberculosis medication was doing, and that was theorized to be the reason that it had these antidepressant effects.
Okay.
And that was the start of where this hypothesis came that low serotonin or low monoamines leads to depression.
Got it.
And I should specify that this is a heavily debated topic, and this is just a theory, and there's a lot of evidence countering this theory as well. But this is
what got the ball
started.
rolling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There were some other examples of medications that came up that had that same effect, where some medications lowered your amounts of serotonin, and then people saw that it made them depressed. So there's a few pieces of evidence that brought this up. But this led to the very first class of antidepressant medications, which are still used today as well. They're called monoamine oxidase inhibitors.
These are still used.
These are still used. They are not first line. They're not the go-to that psychiatrists use for people who need psychotropic medications.
But if someone has tuberculosis and feeling down, this is probably a good way to go.
It might be a good way to go.
Yeah. Again, you're the doctor.
Yeah, no, I would not use these for tuberculosis. So, yeah, these are still used. MAOIs, some of them are called tranylcypromine, isocarboxazid, and phenelzine.
MAOIs.
MAOIs. Yeah.
Maui.
I think you would also find this interesting is that one of the reasons they're not used is that they carry some pretty significant side effects that could lead to extremely high blood pressure and brain bleeding. And the reason for those is cheese.
And the reason, what do you mean you eat too much cheese while you're on the MAOIs?
When you eat too much cheese on the MAOIs.
Yeah.
This is real, by the way.
This is real. You're serious. Your brain bleeds.
You could get extremely high blood pressure, and you could get brain bleeding.
Well, the first thing people want to do once they start feeling happier is eat cheese. So that's bad. I also think when you're feeling really sad, you eat cheese. I mean, you're always eating cheese. So I think that I think everyone should stay pretty clear of these. I mean, that's scary.
That's the reason people should stay away, is because everyone loves cheese, and this would be...
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
brutal. I mean, if I were a doctor and I were seeing a vegan, I'd be like, okay, well, actually, I have the drug for you. but they cheat. You know what I mean?
They do. They do. You never know.
Yeah, you can't trust.
No, but it's completely real. So not only do you have that enzyme in your brain, MAO, you also have it in your gut. Like in your stomach.
There's that mind-gut connection, Bijan. It's huge.
There you go.
People are loving this stuff.
They love it. They eat it up.
Literally.
These, like, a lot of these cured foods or aged foods, like, it's not just cheese. Pretty much anything on a charcuterie board. So salami, like cured meats, cheese, wine, all of these foods you have to avoid because they have this compound in them called tyramine. And normally the MAO enzyme in your gut breaks down tyramine. But when you're taking a drug that inhibits MAO, you're getting increased tyramine, and tyramine leads to increased blood pressure in your body. So literally when you start people on these meds, you have to say, make sure you're avoiding these specific foods. And unfortunately, it's like a lot of foods that you'll find on a charcuterie board. So if you like charcuterie boards, like, this is an issue.
What about the actual board?
You could eat the board, but I would never recommend someone eat the board, you know?
I was just trying to think, like, if they're at a party and they can't have what's on the board. I thought maybe the board, but never mind.
I could see how you got there. I could see how you got there.
Maybe just ask for a glass of water.
I think that's a reasonable alternative. Okay. Yeah, you had these medications, MAOIs. That was kind of like one of the first antidepressants that we had. Then there were these other ones called TCAs, tricyclic antidepressants. I won't get into that. We'll do that at another episode. But essentially, you can see that how that tuberculosis drug led to us having this understanding that a low level of these neurotransmitters leads to depression. So then you have these pharmaceutical companies in the 1970s, 1960s, trying to come up with very specific ways to target the neural chemistry in our brain, specifically targeting serotonin or norepinephrine and dopamine. So this pharmaceutical company called Eli Lilly.
Heard of it?
Heard of it, yeah. So they developed this drug called fluoxetine.
Bingo bango, got it in my cabinet.
You have it? Fluoxetine?
Yeah.
What's the brand name?
Prozac.
Prozac. You got
God.
it. And so, I can also say this kind of feels like mansplaining in a way. Is this?
It doesn't feel like that because
Yeah.
I know you and you're also the one who's at Harvard right now, residency, and I'm not. But yeah, actually, technically, you are a man explaining to me a woman.
I think next episode or one of these later episodes, I think you'll have to do all of this research and then
I think you're
explain this
right.
to me. Yeah. Just to
That's
keep
called
things even.
mace-splaining.
Mace-splaining.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to mace-splain to me.
I will,
Okay, good.
but please keep mansplaining.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Prozac was one of the first ones in the United States, and then you have all of these other SSRIs that came out. Do you know the names of some of these SSRIs?
You've got Zoloft.
Mm-hmm.
You've got I'm thinking of ones, but I think they're SNRIs because like Prestica is an SNRI, which I guess we can talk about those in a second. But Cymbalta SNRI. I think another SSRI would be like Lexapro.
You got it. Yeah.
Right. That's a big one.
Yeah.
What are some other SSRIs?
Yeah, you have Zoloft, you have Paxil, you
Paxil.
have
That's an
Lexapro.
oldie. A lot of
That's
people
an
don't take
older one.
Paxil. Yeah.
Yeah, you have Celexa, you have something called Luvox, which is commonly used in OCD. So you have a lot of different ones, and they're not all the same. In fact, not a lot of them aren't even that clean in terms of just selectively binding to serotonin reuptake channels. Some of them bind to others too. So like some bind to norepinephrine, some bind to dopamine. In fact, your medication, Prozac, it doesn't selectively bind to those serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Even though it's an SSRI.
Correct. At a higher dosage, it will also bind to norepinephrine. Sometimes people will call it, or psychiatrists will call it, an activating SSRI because norepinephrine is one of those neurotransmitters that's thought to be related to like alertness and arousal. So they'll say that Prozac is more of an activating SSRI because it gives you more norepinephrine so you can be more alert and active.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I did try going down to like 35 or it was maybe 30, 35 and I could tell a difference. I just didn't feel I felt a lot better than 30 or 35. I can't remember the exact thing. So there was like a difference between 40 and below. And something that I realized for a long time, I always took my antidepressant at night before bed. And just because also I kind of always went to bed around the same time, or at least got in bed at the same time, but I didn't always wake up at the same time. So I was like, I think it's smarter for me to take it more regularly at night. But then I was looking at the bottle and it said to take it in the morning. And I was like, why would it specify that? Also, no doctors ever told me I had to do that. So like probably 5 years ago, I started taking it in the morning. It made a huge difference.
Really?
I sleep so much better now. I used to just get and I'm still a night owl. Like I still kind of get perked up at night.
Yeah.
But not nearly as bad as when I was taking Prozac at night.
Really? So it makes a huge difference. And I would say even like I've had patients who do take it at night too. So it's not like people react differently to it. Some people, it does help them like feel more tired. So then they just take it at night. But I think yours is kind of a good example of it following the mechanism too. It's like I take it, I feel a little more energized. But like a lot of people react differently to it, and you're like, oh, clearly this would be the way that it's going to work for this patient. And it just like works a little bit differently. So it's important to like notice that too. Like when I take it, I feel X. When I take it at this time, I feel Y. So it's important to talk with your doctor and make sure that you're understanding why.
Yeah, and I did tell my psychiatrist about that, and she was kind of confused. She was like she didn't think it would make that big of a difference. I guess it doesn't for many people, but
there's actually there's an excerpt from, have you heard the book The Body Keeps the Score?
Yes, I read it, and by read it I mean listen to it
on Audible. Are they sponsoring
really
us?
long.
It is really long. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if Audible would like to sponsor us, I think that would be great.
I've been reading The Body Keeps
Mhm.
the Score, and I came across this quote about Prozac when it first came out and him using it. I just thought it was really cool to share.
Oh, please.
So in the book, he says, on Monday, February 8th, 1988, Prozac was released by the drug company Eli Lilly. The first patient I saw that day was a young woman with a horrendous history of child abuse who is now struggling with bulimia. She basically spent much of her life binging and purging. I gave her a prescription for this brand new drug, and when she returned on Thursday, she said, I've had a very different last few days. I ate when I was hungry, and the rest of the time I did my schoolwork.
Oh,
This was one of the most dramatic statements I'd ever heard in my office.
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing and it's uplifting, but it's also like, wow, what an easy fix, kind of. Like,
Yeah.
I think some people would take Prozac or whatever and it not be so immediate and not be clearly better. And
Yeah.
it's kind of great that she had that reaction.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like this is kind of you could say an outlier because like she responded extremely quickly, like in the last, like it took like a few days for it to work. But yeah, probably a mix of feelings. For one, it's like, I wonder if part of it is like, wow, all it took was this medication for me to feel good versus like all these other things I've tried. And then
Right.
on top of that, yeah, I mean, for other patients, like they've tried Prozac and it doesn't work as quickly or at all. And probably a mix of emotions that brings up. But it's cool that just this new drug you're prescribing as a psychiatrist, not sure how it's going to work, and just this patient who was suffering is just like alleviated by that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, because ideally he's doing it to make people feel better. So to be able to have that like instant gratification sort of
Yeah.
great. But that kind of goes to that, and that makes me think that that really was a chemical imbalance then, which I think this is something we could talk about next week with the psychiatrist, because I think even the idea of chemical imbalance is misunderstood and kind of even a theory
Yeah.
when
Exactly.
you say. So for her, it's like if that helped so much, like her environment didn't, from this one quote we have, her environment didn't change, just the medicine, and it made
Yeah.
such a big difference. It's like, oh, then yeah, maybe there is something. So yeah, I want to ask the doctor next week about chemical imbalance.
Totally. I'm really excited for you to speak with her. I feel like, I've spoken with her at length about like just like details within pharmacology, but I feel like someone who is on the medication and like you're going to have very different questions for her than I would for her. And I think your questions are probably what more of the questions that our listeners are probably going to be having anyway. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That quote makes me think of my quote that I wanted to share, which was
You
I
had a
just yeah, not my personal quote, but I was watching Catastrophe, which is a really good show on. It came out in like 2015 on Amazon Prime. I don't know if that's where it originally came out, but just go with me. That's where I watched it.
Yeah, I was going with
Okay, sorry. Sorry I got so defensive. But the Sharon Horgan, the creator and writer, her character in it said that someone was coming from the US, she was in the UK, and bringing over, it wasn't Prozac, but it was something, I think it may have been even an anti-anxiety medicine. And her husband in the show was like, why do you take that stuff? And she says, I just like feeling better than my factory settings.
Oh
And I just love that quote because that's so funny to me. And it also is like such a forgiving way to think about needing medication, like self-forgiving, I guess, like it's just a very understandable. Most people want to feel better than their factory settings.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.
Thank
and
you.
We'll see you at the next episode.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
And please join us for our next episode with psychiatrist Dr. Monty Meyer as we go even more in depth into SSRIs. That episode will be released the week after next. As of right now, SSRI'M OK will be released bi-weekly. When I say bi-weekly, I mean once every 2 weeks, not 2 episodes a week. That would be wild. I mean, we could do it. I just have a lot going on. So once every 2 weeks.
And if there's any topic or any type of professional you'd like us to have on our podcast, please email us at SSRI'MOKPOD@gmail.com and let us know what you would like to hear. And because we want to hear from you, we want to see what would be interesting to you.
SSRI'M OK is executive produced by Bijan Zarabi and Macy Isaacs. Zoe Zaxon is our producer and editor. Music is As I Figure by Kevin MacLeod, and art is by Zoe Zaxon. Special thanks to our sponsor, Pure Yoga TV.